We're watching World of Warcraft's Pandora's Box. This is a Mad Season upload. We've been working on getting through this video because it's 2 hours long. I didn't want to do like a 2-hour react just like going for it. So what we've been doing is we did part 1, which is up on my YouTube channel. This is part 2. Okay, we're at around 38 minutes. This is, so far it's been an awesome watch. So we're continuing with part 2, Pandora's Box from Mad Season, without further ado.
From major scandals, such as erroneously charging subscribers for years of game time in a single day, with some racking up charges and overdraft fees into the thousands. Similar to the Age of Conan, Warhammer failed to retain this early surge of players, and servers were shut down, and the subscriber base dropped even lower than that of their 2001 MMO, The Dark Age of Camelot. The game officially shut down in 2013, but many deemed it to be truly dead just 1 year after its release.
Oh, the Lich King. Oh, yes.
Shortly after, the Wrath of the Lich King expansion saw its release, and Blizzard would once more break sales records. Players charged into Northrend with new zones to explore, dungeons and raids to conquer, and a new class to discover. The Death Knight was what everyone expected and more. A lot more. Way too much, in fact, as many saw them to be far too powerful on release. They would later be tuned down in upcoming patches. Replayability was amplified as the achievement system was implemented, and players could collect points, titles, mounts, and more through this new feature aimed towards completionists.
Do you guys remember TBC pre-patch with DKs? And when DKs died, they had like 30 seconds where they turned into a ghoul. And when they turned into a ghoul, that form was so strong that they could literally 1v1 people. I remember wanting to like punch my monitor so damn bad when like I'm playing arena and it's like 2 Death Knights and you kill them both and the game doesn't end because they're in the ghoul form, and then they killed you in the double ghoul form. Oh my gosh, was that frustrating, man.
It received positive reviews of its many new features and improvements, and the subscriptions continued their upward trend, eventually peaking at 12 million. Just as with the Burning Crusade, it seemed to be unstoppable, though it would be where the first sign of weakness showed. Through the numbers that have been made public, there wasn't a single moment where Wrath had lost subscriptions between reports, but it was also the first expansion where they had stopped gaining subscribers, as they hovered around 11 to 12 million throughout the course of the expansion, and as shown, it wasn't due to any of these would-be WoW killers. In August of the same year, the raiding scene expanded in a big way, as the third raid tier for the expansion, the Trial of the Crusader, would release with the heroic difficulty setting. Previously, if players saw an extra challenge with the encounters, they could impose boss-specific hurdles or restrictions upon themselves for bonus loot, achievements, and bragging rights. Players would now instead toggle this optional difficulty setting before entering the raid, and every boss within would deal more damage, take more damage.
You guys see that name? It says Pursue Czar. That's me.
Deal more damage, take more damage, and gain extra mechanics in exchange for better quality loot. This, along with the Mythic raiding mode to be introduced later, would become a landmark change in the core design of the game, aimed to increase accessibility by greatly lowering the base normal difficulty and funneling those seeking a greater challenge into this optional difficulty setting. This change in design would later be accelerated in the next expansion, the Cataclysm, which would be unveiled in BlizzCon 2009.
That will very literally change the face of the world of Azeroth as you know it.
Yes!
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yes!
I give you World of Warcraft Cataclysm!
Yes! I have the chills, bro. Oh, remember that?
The world of Azeroth was about to change for good, as the entire old world was deemed to be outdated by 2009 standards.
No,
this
the
expansion's
downfall.
villain, Deathwing, would ravage the Eastern Kingdoms in Kalimdor, reshaping them visually and mechanically by reworking each quest. Players would be able to explore all of these changes from the comfort of their flying mounts, which were now enabled in the old world. 2 new races, the Worgen for the Alliance and the Goblin for the Horde, would also make their debut, as well as a reworked talent system. The game was to go over its biggest makeover to date, and whether it was for the better or worse was yet to be seen. December marked the month.
The more, like, so Cataclysm's relaunching later this year. Wrath is moving to Kata. And the more I think about the updated talent trees, like, I'm not a fan. The more I think about, like, the updated world, I'm not a fan. Like, don't get me wrong, my memory of Kata was like pretty good. Like, I enjoyed playing Kata, but like, I think in a lot of instances it was the beginning of the end for a lot of like people that enjoyed the classic styles and the classic version of the game. It modernized things a little bit, maybe too far for some people, right? Press 1 in the chat if you're really looking forward to Kata. Press 2 in the chat if you're like, I'll play maybe, but it's, I like Wrath Classic TBC, other versions better, but I still might play. But yeah, I'm seeing like mainly 2s, and I'm kind of a 2. I think I am gonna play, but I'm not like really looking forward to it. I think like I was with Classic TBC and Wrath. But I do. Let me be clear. I do think Kata will be fun. Especially hopping back into that game mode for a little bit, and it's a little more modern, so it will feel kind of more familiar in that regard to like retail players and stuff, and maybe it'll kind of bridge the gap, so to speak. But I have my doubts.
Of another hallmark feature being added to the game, the Dungeon Finder. No longer did players have to travel the world to run to their favorite dungeons, as this tool matchmakes them together and teleported the party directly to the entrance.
Right.
At the time, this feature was received with overwhelmingly positive feedback and a welcome quality of life improvement. Though restricted to players only on their server at the time of its launch, it would later be opened up to other servers, which had the unintended side effect of alienating the community from each other. Previously, having to manually form groups had served as a critical and natural way for players to meet one another and make friends, and they would soon learn the downsides of automating the process. By handling the formation of the group automatically, social interaction was replaced with convenience, and the social aspect critical to MMO gameplay suffered as a result. By itself, this negative impact of the system would remain relatively minor, but in the coming years, players would notice a trend of eliminating these critical social structures in the name of convenience and at the cost of the game's sense of community, which many claim to be one of the biggest features to which it owed its success.
I mean, we talk about this all the time, but the friction that Classic had that seems like, oh, this just isn't good game design, or it's there's no quality of life, or it's just before these systems were implemented, actually brought people together, right? Running through a city, through Elwyn Forest, through Westfall to get to Dead Mines, you met a lot of people along the way, you interacted with the world, you had funny interactions with someone else that was questing in Westfall at level 12 on the Harvest Golem, saw level 19 run by, and it was like, oh, the world is alive because there's another player that I see, and maybe I'll ask for help really quick, and like that's what makes an MMO go round. And it's like, oh, you queue up and like the whole thing falls flat. I had an analogy earlier with like Arena and dueling, and I think dueling is a critical part for Arena to be successful, because dueling is the fundamental block of PvP. You can't 3v3 if you don't have a fun 1v1 structure. The reason why is because 1v1s are how you meet people, how you learn the game at the most fundamental level, because there's less going on, it's easier to get into for a new player, etc. But now dueling doesn't really exist. No one really duels because the meta sucks for dueling, and layering exists. So if you go outside the city, there's no one there anyway. So no one really duels. And 3v3 suffering, in my opinion, because of that. You can't pull out that fundamental block and expect everything else to stay. And it's similar here, I think, with queuing up. It's like, no, traversing the world and seeing other players is part of what makes the MMO stand up. You can't just pull that piece out like Jenga and expect it to not fall. Like this is a critical component, right?
The community would also see changes outside of the game. In July of 2010, Blizzard unveiled their new Real ID system, where their supporting forums for all of their games, not just World of Warcraft, would no longer display character names when posting, but rather real names tied to the account.
Yeah.
Players and onlookers alike reacted with concern of Blizzard's disregard of basic privacy rights, deeming that their actions would essentially dox the entire forum community.
Yep.
Doxing is the act of unearthing someone's personal information, such as their name or address, with the ultimate goal of real-life harassment. Today, the advent of swatting shows the repercussions of those whose personal information was leaked. For a company to do the work for them was seen as extremely dangerous. Flame wars and online disputes, past, present, and future, would serve as vessels for real-life harassment, they argued. They stated that the reason for the change was to cut down on forum trolling, their logic being that if someone's real name was tied to their post, they'd think more carefully about how they treat others, and that, quote, removing the veil of anonymity, typical to online dialogue, will contribute to a more positive forum environment and connect the Blizzard community in ways that they haven't.
That reasoning actually isn't that bad, but there's other problems with it, like we saw. The reasoning itself isn't like that off. It's like, yeah, it's there's people that are trolling because they're anonymous, but like you can't do that.
Connected before. Another community manager put it to the test, and in an effort to quell the players' fear, he posted his real-life name. Within 1 day, players found and published his address, phone number, age, and took to placing false pizza orders in his name, and even placed death threats, connecting him with the community in ways that he's never been connected before. Shortly after, the co-founder of Blizzard, Mike Morhaime, stepped in and announced that they had rescinded their plans of publishing the players' real names. In October, Blizzard pinned down a release date for the Cataclysm expansion, December 7th of the same year, and despite the controversy, the game in October would reach its peak subscriber count of 12 million. The holidays came, and the Day of Reckoning was at hand, and the World of Warcraft would suffer Cataclysm in more ways than one. In addition to the retuned Old World, the talent system would also see an overhaul, altering the traditional freeform 3-tree talent system into specializations. Players would be forced to pick just one, and lose access to many spells iconic to the other two. The trees as a whole would also be simplified, and the amount of points to invest reduced. Class and item balance in general would also be at the forefront of changes in the expansion, mostly through the form of removal. Spell ranks were removed, and all abilities now just had one rank that scaled with your level, and were trained automatically, and much more. The Cataclysm expansion is seen by many to mark the point when the RPG and MMORPG was made to be lowercase, as it transformed into a much simpler version of an already straightforward game. As World of Warcraft strayed further and further away from its social and RPG roots, a community of private server players would grow larger and larger with each expansion. Independent groups took to hosting past versions of the game, the most prolific of which being of its original state, referred to as vanilla. Though its beginnings were humble, this private server community would eventually grow large enough to become a problem for Blizzard, and they would find themselves embroiled in legal battles to protect their IP from infringement, and would eventually influence a major developed project many years later. Regardless, they showed once more that they had no difficulty in selling expansions, as once again, they broke their own sales record with Cataclysm, selling a staggering 3.3 million copies on release day. But unlike the previous expansions, they had not seen an overall increase in subscribers post-release, instead remaining steady at the 12 million mark it had been stuck at since the beginning of.
I wonder what the overall global market for like gamers that are interested in MMOs is, because during like Wrath was really good, right? And during Wrath it had 12 million. I wonder how many potential people could have even played. Like that's a lot of people, man. Like what's the cap here, right? Like out of people that had internet, had computers, had $15 per month to spend, out of people that were interested in gaming and liked fantasy games and like wanted to play an MMORPG, like must have been a pretty large percentage of it. So well done. For me personally, I've told this story a few times, but in high school, it was during Wrath in high school, and I actually quit during Wrath. Not because I didn't like the game, but my friends shamed me into, like, they're like, to Czar, actually they called me Josh. Josh, you need to IRL a bit. You're playing too much WoW. And I'm like, oh, come on. So like I went out and made friends and partied and stuff a little bit. And I mean, I soon came back to WoW, but I had to get it out of my system and realize that it wasn't that fun at all to go outside. But I saw a commercial in Cataclysm, all right? And it was like something along the lines of like, Cataclysm, 2 weeks free. And I was like, free? 2 weeks free? What do you mean? It's a new expansion. And there was this commercial, and I go on the website, and indeed, you could play Cata for 2 weeks for free. And I from the commercial, I was like, dude, if it's free, then like I'm not gonna not play because it's free, and like I'm not gonna like get re-addicted or anything. I just want to check it out because it's free and like it's good value. I have to check it out, Mom. So I downloaded it. I played. I've been playing ever since
2009, and for the first time since its inception in 2004, the World of Warcraft would see a loss in reported subscribers. In fact, Cataclysm would fail to gain subscribers in a single reported quarter in its near 2-year run, discounting the release of the next expansion, the Mists of Pandaria, which would be announced in October.
Mob.
The initial reaction would be very mixed. The theme of the expansion was so unexpected that many thought it to be an out-of-season April Fool's joke.
Yeah,
Players would
pandas,
explore
really?
the mysterious world of Pandaria with a new race, the Pandaren, and a new class, the Monk. Dungeons were getting a special challenge mode to bring relevancy once more to 5-man content, and scenarios would be queuable micro-dungeons designed for 3 players, and the pet battle system was also implemented, a minigame reminiscent of the popular Pokemon franchise.
Pet battles.
As for the talent system, it would be simplified even further into the tier system, offering more impactful choices.
I loved Mop, but I was not a fan of the tier. Like I like classic talent trees way better. I loved Mop, but this I'm not a big fan.
Reduced quantity of just 6 points to invest. And most controversially, cross-realm zones would eventually be implemented, where players of differing realms would be able to see and interact with one another. Due to the falling subscriber base brought on by the Cataclysm, there were far too many servers running for the dwindling player base, and as a result, the worlds were starting to become barren. By grouping servers together, Blizzard aimed once more to breathe life into the world of Azeroth. While many looked at the expansion as something new and fresh, many more would be immediately turned off by its aesthetics, and due to the downward trend in subscriptions, skepticism if it would be a success was at an all-time high. This was still far into the future though, and the current focus remained to be Cataclysm, which at this point was still steadily losing subscribers. In November, along with the final raid, Dragon Soul, the LFR system would see its release. Similar to the Dungeon Finder released in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, this would allow players to matchmake with others in a queue-based raiding mode, doubling down on their design of trading away critical social and RPG functions for the sake of convenience and accessibility. To accommodate for the increased disorganization that came with queue-based matchmaking, the difficulty would be lowered even further than that of the base normal difficulty. It was from this point forward that players no longer needed to even join a guild to experience the endgame content. They didn't need to read strategies, and they didn't even need to speak a single word in fact, as Blizzard deemed it an issue that 100% of the player base were not completing these raids in their entirety. The accomplishment of clearing a raid would be more accessible than ever before.
I think I fundamentally disagree with that. And here's where I might lose some people, and that's okay. But I really feel like back in Classic WoW, how many players actually rated Nax or AQ40? It was like 1%. Like, I never did. But I thought it was cool inspecting someone with Nax gear, and it gave me a reason to keep playing, because it was like really hard to get to that. How many people killed Illidan in TBC? How many people killed Arthas, or the Lich King, in Wrath? Almost nobody, right? Like on the hardest difficulties, like or the even difficulties, maybe in Wrath. Like my point is almost nobody. I didn't, but it was still awesome. almost no one cleared it, but it was still awesome. And those were the expansions where everyone seems to like the best. And not many people did it. I don't buy this, like, we have to get everybody to all the content kind of thing. It's like, no, if you're a casual noob, then you can be a casual noob and just kind of level up and do some heroics and mythics or whatever the heck, and then maybe eventually you can get to the end game, or maybe not if you don't want to put the time in, but that's okay. You can still have fun, and other players who are more dedicated can, and then you can inspect them and get motivated because they have cool and rare stuff that you did not put the time into achieving, so you don't get to have the privilege of wearing that title or that mount or that gear set. So too bad, but it gives you something to look forward to, and it gives you a little, like, carrot on the stick, so to speak. But when you just kind of like give this accessibility to everyone, it starts undermining the whole point of playing the game in the first place. There's no carrot anymore, and then all of a sudden everyone stops. It's like, oh, what's the point? And not only that, but the degradation of, like, the social systems and hierarchies and structures, like guilds, like speaking to someone, like making and interacting with friends. These things are important, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to join a guild anymore. It's kind of like Tinder for dating, and people just keep swiping and swiping and swiping. I mean, hey, if you found your significant other on Tinder, or your wife or something, or husband, like, that's fantastic. But a lot of people really struggle because there's so many options and so much accessibility. It's hyper accessibility, and that isn't necessarily a good thing at the end of the day either. Because it's like, oh, this didn't work out perfectly, on to the next one then, instead of trying to figure it out, right? All right, old man boomer rant over. Let's keep watching.
But as a result, the accomplishment would mean nothing from this point forward. During this time, another would-be WoW killer was beginning to generate interest. Star Wars Galaxies at this point had been shut down in order to bolster the subscriber base of Star Wars: The Old Republic, developed by BioWare and published by... It would be attempt number 2 for Star Wars on the massively multiplayer scale. This installment promised a unique and fully voice-acted campaign for each of their classes, a space shooter component with a customizable ship, a thriving endgame for PvE and PvP, and perhaps most importantly, it was during the first time where the reigning champion showed weakness. While ultimately the previous contenders failed on their own merits, it can be argued that the tremendous success of the World of Warcraft during their debut certainly made them look worse in comparison. Now that this weakness was showing though, the timing was ideal. Would the Old Republic succeed where its predecessors failed? Ex-subscribers, disillusioned with the direction that the game had taken throughout the Cataclysm, looked at the Old Republic as the true successor this time. Players had been doomsaying the imminent demise of World of Warcraft ever since its launch in 2004, only this time, the game's downward trend would support their claims. So, the moment of truth came, the launch arrived, and like many other MMOs before it, the Old Republic launched too early. In an attempt to release it during the holiday season, it was rushed out, and would suffer from technical issues, game-breaking bugs, and questionable design decisions, most notable of which is their use of the hero engine, which proved to be poor in an MMO environment. There would be a short delay between a player casting a spell and that spell actually landing.
Ooh, yeah, not good. Not good. Blizzard's always had
An issue they
smooth
attempted
movement,
to
man.
rectify by tying an animation for each ability to make it seem more natural. As a result, though, the combat felt very sluggish and awkward, and those used to the crisp and smooth nature of the World of Warcraft's combat system noticed a huge and immediate downgrade in quality. This, combined with other disappointing features, such as their spaceship component being entirely on rails, hindered its success in its crucial launch period. The game had sold over 2 million copies and held 1.7 million subscribers, which was around a sixth of the World of Warcraft subscriptions at the time, the closest that any recent MMO came to rivaling WoW's popularity since its launch in 2004. But much like the Lord of the Rings Online, the Age of Conan, and Warhammer Online, the Star Wars: The Old Republic suffered a similar fate, and the subscriptions quickly plummeted. Not even 8 months later, it would convert to the free-to-play model, often seen as the death sentence of MMOs. Today, the game holds a total of 5 servers, once again coming nowhere near being the WoW killer it was predicted to be.
Ah, this is such a good scene.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy them,
World of Warcraft.
not join them.
Time marched on, and the Mists of Pandaria expansion would release in the month of September, and for the first time since the release of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, they saw an increase in subscriptions, though the eagerness of the player base was notably diminished, as this would be the first expansion to fail in breaking sales records for Blizzard upon release, falling 30% below than that of Cataclysm. Barring this initial surge, they would be unable to halt the downward trend that had begun since the launch of Cataclysm, as subscribers would quickly drop from 10 million at launch to 9 million, then 8, and around 6.8 at its lowest point, a drop of over.
Yo, I've said this before, and once again, I'm going to have people disagree with me, and that's okay, but bro, for me, when I'm playing World of Warcraft, I really appreciate the art style of classic TBC and then Wrath. Once, and I liked MoP, by the way. I loved MoP. I really did. In terms of the gameplay and arena, I thought it was top notch. Loved it. But I must say, when they added pandas and then the furry, what are the foxes, the Volparen, and then when they added the dragons, Drakthir. Wait a minute. Orcs versus humans. Wait a second. Wait a second, Blizzard. For me personally, as like a lifelong WoW fan, I would rather have them not gone in that direction. Like personally, like the furry, playful. It's like, wait, whoa. We're fighting here. We're fighting, bro. Foxes?
30%, and the players were starting to feel the effect of a world that grew less active with each passing day. Crossrealm officially saw its release, which would make the world seem sprawling once more, but once again at the expense of the server's community, which would be present only in name from this point forward. Seeing the same players and guilds on your server consistently turned out to be an integral part of establishing a community that was only realized once it was taken away. The world once more had players in it, but due to the large amount of servers that would be grouped together, players scarcely saw or recognized other players from previous adventures. The basis to form a community, which had been a key reason for its success, was now a distant memory.
Right.
The world was in a predicament, and Blizzard had a difficult problem to solve. A nearly empty world with little community, or a full world, ironically enough, with no community. Though innocent enough on launch, Crossrealm is seen today as a necessary evil for a problem, which true solution lies in recapturing subscribers now lost, an issue that Blizzard would struggle with for years to come, as the once iconic MMORPG now barely resembled an MMO due to its destroyed social structures, and barely an RPG due to its abandoned RPG elements, which would be taken a step further in March of 2013, as the game saw another major change with its first instance of forged loot. Released with the Throne of Thunder raid, loot had the potential to have an increased quality, regardless of the difficulty at which the players defeated the bosses, having previously lost longevity in the raiding scene through the reduced base difficulty. They had hoped to regain it via randomized loot, and although it was relatively tame at the time of its release, this forging system would later be seen by many to get out of hand, and help diminish and confuse the reward structure that had been standard for the game for 8 years at that point. Time passed, patches released, new raids and systems debuted, and much changed with the expansion in the year of 2013. Something that didn't though was this ongoing downward trend of subscribers. In BlizzCon 2013, Blizzard would announce its next expansion, the Warlords of Draenor. The player base would journey back to the world of Draenor, an alternate reality before it was corrupted into what they knew as the Outland in the Burning Crusade expansion. It's here where they would establish forward bases known as garrisons and launch a campaign against Garrosh Hellscream, the leader of the United Orc Army known as the Iron Horde, who are set to invade the land of Azeroth. At this point, the private server community had gained considerable traction as players yearned for the game that had originally.
Everyone wanted like their own player housing, so Blizzard put in garrisons, which like in theory is like a semi-player housing experience where you can invite people over for a massive party. But the reality is World of Warcraft gamers are a bunch of like introverts online in a video game in their own bedrooms or basements. And now, instead of interacting in a social world online, they were all AFK in their garrisons, and you never saw anyone anymore because everyone was alone at their home in a video game while they were alone at their home in real life. And like all of a sudden, you just stopped seeing players altogether in normal cities.
Captivated them and were becoming more and more unruly as the retail version strayed further and further away from its roots. And they began campaigning Blizzard to officially develop and support this past version of the game. In a Q&A panel during the convention, one such player asked for an official answer on the possibility of a legacy server. The question was fielded by J. Allen Brack, at the time a production director for World of Warcraft, and he delivered this now infamous answer.
Have you ever thought about adding servers for previous expansions as they were then?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
Oh!
Remember when you had to like spam cities and say need a tank, need a tank, need a tank during the Burning Crusade days? You don't remember that because now you just push a button that says go to the dungeon. You don't want to do that.
Though the quote would draw immediate ire of the legacy community, it would prove to be an integral moment in its development, serving as a rallying cry of sorts, and bringing more and more attention on the possibilities of developing such a version of the game. The answer was seen as dismissive and out of touch, especially considering the fact that private servers at this point had grown to new levels of popularity. And with this dismissive answer, the questions started turning into demands and discussion of its viability or not, and served to fan the flames of a community becoming increasingly disillusioned of the World of Warcraft and Blizzard in their current state.
Okay, this might be a good stopping point. That was another like 20 to 30 minutes. We are basically halfway through the video now. So we have 1 hour left. We can do it in two 30-minute segments, or we could do maybe a 1 hour one if we really felt like it tomorrow or something. But it's 11:40 and I need to log into Stranglethorn Vale like right now. I'm really enjoying this. I wish I could just sit there for like 2 hours and watch it. I guess I could, but we got some gaming to do. So let's hop into that and we'll catch the rest of that tomorrow.